Hey guys, it's Team Lead again. Your genius playboy philanthropist bringing you another amazing video. So I thought to myself, is there some kind of a list of so-called amazing interview questions where people get asked and they don't know how to answer, or maybe just questions themselves are not that amazing? And lo and behold, I actually found this amazing website which has 100 interview questions for software developers. Can you believe it? So someone had enough of time to sit through it and just do this thing. So let's go through his rationale. So hiring smart software developers is not easy. I totally agree. If I knew how to check someone's IQ and all of his intelligence before doing tests, that would speed the process. Okay, so if you're not careful, you might end up hiring a bunch of moronic mandrills. Well, word to the wise, it's a bit harsh. Even if you don't think someone is smart, you shouldn't just drop such keywords here and here, because, well, what if he was just shy? If you are talking about, let's say, standard, so to speak, software developer, we're kind of introverted rather than extroverted, so sometimes we may not answer something when challenged, not because the question was too hard or it was too amazing or too smart, god forbid. No, sometimes we just don't want to answer things which we believe are not that amazing. So again, he has his own explanation why that works, and I think this is dumb on many levels, and let me explain real quick. So he says, my questions are simply starting points for this discussion. So I'm not sure how much time you have on your hands, but if you want to discuss on 100 questions, that's, I don't know how much time that would take even for me, right? And I'm not some greatest developer which ever lived. That's either was or the guy who did Linux, Linus Torvalds. So one of those. I'm taking the first place. So first would be Linus, the second will be was, and the third place probably goes to me. It's by my own calculations. It can be wrong, but so he says, for example, there's a question about reasons to static methods and singletons. So I think I'll comment on this later. And if this triggers your candidate to start a tirade against both static methods and singletons, there's a good chance you're dealing with a smart software developer. Yes and no. Actually, you might be dealing with a philosophical developer who can talk hours and hours about stuff which is irrelevant, and he can't really build, but he has his own opinion. So sometimes it's just not about opinion, it's about building things quickly, and essentially you do build things for end client, not for yourself. Right, so there are a lot of questions. I'll try to do 100 as quickly as I can. Can you name a number of non-functional or quality requirements? So it's simple. Functional requirement is you want something for your system to do. Non-functional for it where it stays. So for example, functional requirement will be, as a user, I want each and every click I make to be logged in for future reference, or I want every click I do to be something which goes to analytics to see where I click the best. As an example, that could be a functional requirement. And non-functional requirement would be, I want the machines to have SLA at least of 99.999. That's, I guess, 4 nines I said, or 3. Let's say 4 nines after that, and I want my machines to be on that reliability level. Also, I want my machines to be on specific availability zones as well, because according to our, let's say, specification, that must be so. What is your advice when the customer wants high performance, availability, high security? To pay a lot of cash. Can you name a number of different techniques for specifying requirements? What works best in each case? What works best in each case is really, it's kind of case specific. What different techniques I can say? Well, there isn't such as technique per se. What you do with technical requirements, you usually go to different specialists and you try to do mock calculations to see how that would hold. So for example, you don't know what kind of server you want. So in olden days that was a problem. Now we have cloud auto scaling system, so if you ran out of disks, that can auto scale automatically, so that's not a problem. But if you're doing it in a theoretical level, you just need to place those requirements in a sense that always say do it for now, but also have this, let's say, 20% buffer if something goes wrong. So that's usually the technique. What is the requirements tracing? What is backwards tracing, forward tracing? So usually what the question here is how do you control if you want to have requirement for today and you want to see if that requirement will hold and how it will come in the future. So the idea here is quite simple. You shouldn't focus on such big topics and such smart things. What you do with requirements, you just have versions of them, and if you do requirements well, you kinda add future or so requirements or possibilities in the same document, and that's it. No one really overthinks those requirements because they can change daily. For example, if you're working in public sector and like new law passes which requires your servers to be on your soil, you know, all your requirements go down the drain and need to recalibrate. So which tools you use for keeping track of requirements? I mean, use whatever works best for you. How do you treat changing requirements? Are they good, bad, why? It's a dumb philosophical question. There's nothing to be treated. When you're working with different people, different types of people, there's going to be, you know, change, and it's normal. So as I said, the best way is to have different versions, and you can see from if it's getting repeated, that's probably the problem. How do you prioritize requirements? Do you know specific techniques? So that's quite simple. You can just go level 1, 2, 3, or high, medium, and minor. So that's basically how development does it. You can also add something like critical. So if you need some kind of update which makes your system stable, that's critical. If it's highly needed, so that's high. If it's nice to have, so it's medium. And if it's a small change like a call of the button, you can say it's a low. That's as simple as that. There can be more, but don't unfix stuff. Can you name the responsibilities of the user, the customer, and development requirement? Oh my god. It really depends on the process and the company you're working with. For example, if it can use ITIL practices, it can use TOGAF. It's really dependent on the process, and that's how responsibilities change. In one case, customer can say, I just want stuff to get done, and you kind of do it all. In other, developers works as, let's say, physical layer architect, in others doesn't. So it really depends on the process. Don't ask such questions which, you know, are very dependent case by case. It's silly. What do you do with requirements that are incomplete and incomprehensible? I mean, again, what kind of philosophical, nonsensical Mandrill question is this? You make them complete. I can give you a small pointers here. You're always trying to do your best as best you can, and that's kind of it. And what can I say? Always try to avoid requirements which don't mean concrete things. So for example, never do requirement system must work good, or specific things should come in real time. You know, real time can mean a lot of different things in many different cases. You would think that it should happen at every second, but every second isn't the smallest second. We can have 1/10 of the second, 100 and 1000 of the second. So, you know, even when you say real time, you should define what the real time for you is in this case. So try to move from words which kind of can mean anything to very specific technical words and as abstractions, or very specific numbers which mean very specific things. Functional design. What are metaphors used in functional design? Can you name a successful example? Yes, of course I can name it, but I will not waste time. How can you reduce the user's perception of waiting when some functions take a lot? Again, philosophical question. You use product managers so that you don't do directly. Which controls would you use when a user must select multiple items for a build list? Oh my god. I would use the controls which have been tested by our design. It's not for me to. Usually there's a design and you kind of just do that. It's not for you to decide. Can you name a different measures to guarantee correctness of data entry? There's a lot of measures. It depends where are you validating. Usually you can validate on front end, on the back end, and in the middle layer as well. So it really comes down to your business logic and your development logic. You should really give an example and understand what kind of case we're talking here. Can you name different techniques for prototyping an application? Oh my god! Drawing on the board. Here is one technique. You can do what's called like rapid prototyping. You can try building small iterations. You can use no-code, low-code solutions to make MVPs that work already. You can do a paper sketch. The sky is the limit. Can you name different ways of designing access to large or complex list of features? Well, the simplest way to do is to really build architecture first. So if you have a correct business process and you build architecture, from there you can start actually designing list of features, because without architecture you would be presuming. For example, you're thinking that custom authorization is needed, but solution will be dependent on, let's say, Azure Active Directory. So you don't need to overthink if you don't know what the underlying architecture is. How would you design editing 20 fields for a list of 10 items and editing 3 fields for... Again, stupid question. I wouldn't design it. I would ask a professional designer / UXer person to do it, and his ideas probably trump mine. What is the problem of using different colors when highlighting pieces of text? Well, my guess would be readability. Can you name some limitations of web environment versus a Windows environment? Oh my god, never ask such stupid silly questions like this. Why? Dude, you're comparing something which runs in a application which runs in the Windows environment, and you're asking, well, different abstraction layer to start with, then usability and million, to even correctly discuss this, you shouldn't even ask questions, because it's like, what is the difference between atheist and someone who believes it? We can start a discussion, it will take an hour, and we can both be right and wrong at the same time. So they are essentially different in many ways, and it all comes down to what kind of features you need for your thing to work, and then you choose your environment, right? Technical design. What do low coupling and high cohesion means? What does the principal encapsulation mean? I don't believe you should ask two questions. So encapsulation in essence is a control of access. So if you encapsulate something quite well, you get this feel that you're in control. Coupling, basically, if something is too loosely coupled, they're being placed in different places. If that's very close coupling, everything's basically in the same place. So the question is here: do you understand where is the limit? You need to cut things. If you don't know, you should probably understand that. How do you manage conflicts in the web application and different people editing the same data? Oh my god. Again, web application. What do you mean by web application? Do you mean like React application? Do you mean, Angular based, so what's called a SPA, single page applications, which have different, states and stuff like that. So don't ask questions without giving context about what you're speaking, because it can be anything. So how do you manage conflicts in web application, for example, static page? You don't manage in web application, manage that on the server side by not being relied on specific sessions. You think a little bit outside the box. Do you know about design patterns? Yes. Which design patterns have used a lot in many situations? Do you know what stateless business layer is? Where do long-running transactions fit into that picture? This is very specific question where you're trying to get opinion of someone, but kind of feels you want for me to kind of understand your own opinion. You're kind of saying what is stateless, so probably has no state. So that's your answer right here. And long-running transactions. What do you mean? Where do you fit? So each and every pattern has its shortcomings and pros and cons basically. So ask specific question against something and get specific answers. What kind of diagrams have you used in designing parts of architecture or technical design? Yes. Can you name the different tiers and responsibilities in the entire architecture? Yes. Can you name different measures to guarantee correctness and robustness of data architecture? Yes, again, I can. Do you want me to be specific? So, to name what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Come on, guy, be a little bit more specific. Can you name any differences between object-oriented design and component? Oh my god, so first of all we need to understand what object-oriented is and what's that and what's a component. So to name any difference, you should always provide a plane where you're searching for those differences. Long-term, short-term, architecture-wise, code-wise, libraries used. So please provide the plane you want to work in, and then we can work, because we can talk here for hours without actually me saying what you want to hear, and that's dumb. Never ask questions where you want to just hear your thoughts, because how would you model user authorization, user profiles, permissions in the database? I don't think you should model that on the database. You should probably have identity access management system which kind of controls that, and your database should be interchangeable as possible. So it must probably be dependent on simple models, but if we're using, for example, Active Directory, I kind of already have or don't have access to a specific SQL without doing anything else. So it really depends on architecture. Again, don't ask us questions if you don't know what that means yourself. How would you model animal kingdom? What? With species and behaviors as a class system? Bruh, I mean, how would I model animal kingdom? So please explain to me what you mean animal kingdom is. Are we talking insects here, mammals, I mean, bruh, don't ask philosophical questions. They don't make you seem smart. I mean, as a class system. So what, do you want to hear about inheritance, or just ask about it right away? Construction. How do you make sure that your code can handle different kinds of error situations? You make your code less error prone. Right? I mean, what kind of question is that? Can you explain what test-driven development is? Yeah, it's TDD. So imagine you're kind of writing tests first and then the underlying business stuff later. So it's very philosophical thing. I'm against it. So I would here complain for at least 10 minutes why it doesn't make sense if you're not sure if your code has been written correctly and you're rewriting not only tests but your business logic as well. So that's why I would probably first understand if my underlying services work correctly, then write tests for them. But again, it's just my opinion, as test development driven is. So what do you care most about when reviewing someone else's code? Well, a lot of things, but to put it simply, I usually care about kiss and dry. So if that works in that. Also, it really depends on your team, what kind of specific things you like or you don't like. So, again, do you have specific practices you use, and that should work with those practices. I think consistency. If you're searching one word for me, I would say consistency. I really like if someone else's code is consistent, but not just pure chaos. Even if that consistent thing doesn't necessarily apply to specific patterns. When do you use abstract class and when do you use an interface? Oh my god, such an old and dumb question from the old .NET days. First of all, you have to specify the language you are talking here, because specific languages may have interfaces with default methods, and if you don't know what that is, don't ask questions like so. So mostly most people use interface because they use underlying classes and they make services out of those using dependency injection. So this question is I don't know, 20 years too old to even to work here. Apart from IDEA, so IDEA is basically your development, your program where you develop stuff. Which other favorite tools do you use and think are essential? Notepad++, man, I love that thing. I wouldn't be able to live without it. How do you make sure that your code is both safe and fast? Remember when at the start of this thing I said don't use dumb ass keywords like safe? Define safe and define fast. If it's not defined I can presume my code is always safe because I'm, writing by using protection. I always use protection when I'm writing my code, like at least 3 candoms, and that's how you make your code safe. How I make it fast, I have a pretty fast laptop, and for me it works quite fast. If it's funny to you, it's also funny to me to read this. When do you use polymorphism and when do you use delegates? I would say a very specific thing as well. I would say you use polymorphism mostly 99% of the time, and you use delegates on very specific cases, but it also comes down to the style of development. I use polymorphism in C# a lot because we have like type T's and things like that, so I don't see any reason not to. I know how to box and unbox things, and I know how to make something to be understood on the runtime. So for me, polymorphism all the way. Delegates, specific thing which has its use. I probably use them unknowingly on specific frameworks. I definitely use them by using built-in things in .NET, but by myself I don't really do it. I just that C-like pointer thingy, it really works for that, but for me I don't see the use. I'm super fan of polymorphism. When would you use a class with static members? Oh my god, don't ask, again, very old question, and you don't seem to understand what it means. You're not comparing apples to apples here. Let me explain. Singleton is, first of all, it's a pattern. There isn't such a thing as singleton class unless there is a specific language I never heard of, but in languages, let's say old known languages like C# and Java, it's a pattern. So you make your class in a specific way that when you return, it only returns that one instance, and you can't really make more of it. That's why it's singleton. Static, it's something built in the language itself, so it's not really comparable. Also, usually if you're working with singletons and dependency injection, or even without it, there is this thing called life cycle. So static doesn't have it, it's not there, so you're not comparing apples to apples, right? Can you name examples of anticipating change requirements in your code? You can anticipate all you want, it's going to happen regardless of what you anticipate, always. Can you describe the process you use for writing a piece of code for requirements to delivery? Oh, bro, dude, guy, fellow, amigo, don't ask such questions which require a very long specific response. First of all, as I said, it really depends on the company or environment where you are working. Then usually it's you take business logic, you take architecture, you take functional requirements. If that's all understood, you start writing your piece of code. And it really depends what do you mean by delivery. Is it I just push my code? Is it something regarding versions? Again, guy, please try to explain it. Algorithms. How do you find if a number is a power of 2, and how do you know if it's an odd number? Oh man, one of my most hated topics out there ever is algorithms. And you know why? Because there has been books written like 50 years ago which explains all that stuff, and I don't really need to use it. In real world scenarios you not really use that much. So how do you find that the number is a power of 2? You can use different mathematical things. There are things like modulo operator. There are a lot of techniques to do it. Just choose whichever works for you. How do you know if it's an odd number? I don't know, you can probably use division. How do you find the middle item in the linked list? I can cut linked list in half and you have your middle. How would you change the format of all the phone numbers in 10,000 static HTML pages? There is probably find and replace functionality in text editors. Can you name an example of a recursive solution that you created? Not sure. There has been, probably if you're talking the recursion, you're thinking for going through trees. So it's either something which concerns web, or you have on your hands a binary tree. So again, but we need to talk a lot in detail if we want to explain such topics. Which is faster, finding an item hash table or a sorted list? Very bad question to ask. Generally, you would want to say hash table just because the way it has been built. And by sorted list, do you mean the array list, or do you have specific different implementation? Because sorted, it means, well, how it was sorted. If you're, let's say, using algorithm to sort it, right, and then you taking something from item, that's at least two specific actions you're doing. So, you know, in terms of complexity, just, you know, algorithmically speaking, that's harder, right? But again, you would need to compare apples to apples by talking how the height, the depth of both things, and you know, to take all those things into account to even start discussing such things. Because generally, if you say, is car generally faster than a bicycle? Generally, yes. But if you take both things and bicycle can go on specific roads in town and that bicycle is electric, you know, so define the parameters, then ask such silly questions. What is the last thing you learned about algorithms from the book, magazine, website? Oh, the last thing I learned, hard to tell. I learned that MIT classes are really amazing, and there's this thing called MIT Open Courseware, so really smart people work there. And what I learned that I really should have attended more things in university pertaining to algorithms. How would you write a function to reverse a string, and can you do that without a temporary string? That's kind of cheeky, the second part. So first of all, you have to understand that string is an array of characters, right? So you just need to go and do. So you can do it in a way that you can use an algorithm, like a sorting algorithm, and you know, you can start by sorting things from one side to the other. It really depends on your technique. Also, there's definitely a built-in function you can use, so just use that. What type of language do you prefer for writing complex algorithms? I would say English. I would write in English. It really helps me to write my algorithm down, and to code that, it really depends on the use case. In an array with integers between 1 and 1 million, 1 values, and we have twice, how do you deal each one? Again, there's many ways you can use, like binary algorithms where it goes hops and switches. You can use divide and conquer. There's a lot of ways you can do it. It would really be nice to understand the parameters, because without parameters you're just saying, you know, how would you determine which one? So I can just iterate it like linearly, right, until I have one in memory and like do equals. So is that the most efficient? No, that's stupid. Can I write it very fast? Yes. So again, would such an answer suffice that I know how to do it, or do you want to hear some more specific answer, right? So no, please do. Do you know about the trialing salesman problem? Yes, I can put it in quite simple terms. So trialing salesman problem essentially is when a lot of people currently in our isolation are living and you're receiving goods from, let's say, UPS or Amazon, right? And imagine that all of these delivery guys, they have this like central place where all of the packaging, you know, being done, and they have these delivery guys which has very specific capacity in their cars, and all of the people live in very different places. So what trialing salesman problem is that you want to have most efficient system to delivering goods. So for example, you can load your car with less cargo, making it more agile and doing shorter trips, right? Or you can, for example, have full cargo, but you also add it in a way that you start in the, let's say farthest point from your pickup place, and you start unloading in a sense that let's say nearing your first starting point you're almost empty, and you give, let's say, your last package, and then you refuel. So again, why it's a problem? It hasn't been solved in a correct way. There has been a lot of techniques to do it. So again, yeah, I know, but what do you want to know from it? Data structures. Oh my god, we're 2019. Oh my god, we need to move this. Data structures. How would you implement the structure of a London underground computer's memory? What? Sorry, I don't know how to implement this question into my head. How would you store a value of a column database as efficiently as possible? Again, trick question, because you would want to say I would just use hex code, which is quite simple and short, but to compare hex code would take more time. So you can say what if you use a RGB value. Again, integers are faster, but you would have to build engine on top of that to actually, be able to see. So your call. What is the difference between a queue and a stack? I'm presuming you want to ask something about a heap or what? So again, so something probably you want to hear the answer that something goes one by one or something can get recalculated. I'm not sure what you want to hear. What is the difference in store data on a heap or as a step? So yeah, you should probably ask this first instead of that. So the difference is that, if it's something stacked, you go by and it's being unstacked in the same thing it was stacked, so it has, let's say, order to it, and the other one can be used in a let's say different way. You can take it out, you can take it apart. So that's like value types and reference times. You should probably ask that. How would you store a vector and dimensions in data table? You mean a vector as in line, as in draw line? What do you mean? Can you like be more specific here? What type of language do you prefer for writing complex data structures? Whichever gets the job done the fastest. What is the number 21 in binary format in hex? Oh my god, are you kidding me? I don't speak machine code. What is the last thing you learned about data structures from the book, magazine, webtoon? I learned that they are amazing, and there are frameworks who do it for me. How would you store results of your soccer competition in XML? I wouldn't store in a XML document, because you should probably store those things in database, not in a single file which can get corrupted, changed or whatever. So can you name some text different file formats for starting when you go chat? That's a wrong question, because it's about encoding of a document. So if you encode even something you've written in Notepad++ and you encode it in UTF, it has all those characters. So I'm not sure what you're asking here. You want me to say that there's UTF 16, 32, depending on what kind of bytes we have, or you want me to say that there are specific things like UTF-8, but for example, the Microsoft did it like BOM one, so it has byte order marks. Kind of the same, but a little bit different, right? So what are you asking here? Not sure. Do you know? Testing. Do you know what regression test is? How do you fire that new, change it, have not broken? There is absolutely zero way to verify that something has been broken, because you can test for some things. You can test if, let's say, the method which returns one can return one, but you can never test it if it actually runs in production. Let me give you a simple example. Someone comes in and unplugs your server. That's it. How to test for that? You can't. So, regression testing is in a way that you're just trying to compare a few things and you see where something went wrong. So, you're basically comparing, but there's no way to know. How can you implement unit testing when there are dependencies between a business layer and data layer? There are different types of tests. Unit testing usually, how it started is you have services and you try to return or do something with them, but this is a quite tricky question, because there are things like mocks, and if your service works with real data or real miner, you can't probably just have fake users inserting fake data, right? So that's you really need to understand and talk about different testing scenarios and different cases in order to begin such discussion. So how can you implement? Just add the framework and it works. That's it. Between the business and data layer, so you're testing data or you're testing business things, because that's that's different strategies. Because for business layer, you have business rules, so you have business processes. You know how to check that. You can check that. For data, there isn't such a process as such. It's about integrity and being correct, right? So it's not the same things. Which tools are essential to you for testing the quality of your code? There are many tools like SonarQube, if I said that correctly. There are many tools and frameworks which checks by machine learning or by example by different developers submissions, and you can see it says where you did something right or wrong. What types of problems have you encountered most often in your products after deployment? That the user didn't define something in a way that you understood. Do you know what the code coverage is? What are the code coverages? So usually what you like about code coverage is how much of your code is covered by test, unless you're talking about different coverages here. Do you know the difference between functional testing and explanatory testing? How would you test a website? Again, what do you mean here? Do you know the difference? Yes, you know, something is being done by user, something is being done functional. So how would you test the website? We can write a Phantom.js script which goes and tries to click on many different things, you know. You can write with Selenium actually loading a website and using macro keys to, you know, testing that as you. So there's very specific ways, and the best way to test it is actually do what I call the simple guy test. So give someone who's not an IT person to test your things, and that's going to be tested. What is the difference between a test suite, a test case and a test plan? How would you organize testing? So a test suite is probably an environment, you know, like a Selenium one where you can have all of that. Test case is probably one specific case to test one specific scenario, and test plan is probably, you know, where you have defined what kind of things you want to be testing. So if you have documentation and you have use cases, so you can start testing those use cases according to your documentation, what users should be able to do. What kind of test would you include for a smoke test of an e-commerce website? What do you mean smoke test? Do you want to try to break it, or, you know? There are many ways. What can you do to reduce the chance that the customer finds things that he doesn't like during acceptance testing? So ask before that what kind of things. Actually, scratch that. If you have specific use cases made by the customer, that's how you log it. Can you tell me something that you have learned about testing and quality assurance in the last year? Yes, I learned that testing shouldn't be done in a way most people think it should be done. Actually, a lot of testing is basically you're testing for error. Basically, it's not real tests, and the best test is to use very specific people to try and do it, and that's where, you know, the problem comes. Because you can never know if someone presses something 10 times, he refreshes, he tries to sign in, sign off, he opens one tab, second tab. There is a lot of things a human can do, and you as a developer cannot test against that. For example, someone starts a transaction and just his phone shut down, and you have, let's say you're in the middle of the transaction, and then how for him to proceed? He opens the app and he is like at step 1, but for you there also exists some conversation, so you have to account for that, right? Maintenance. What kind of tools are important to you for monitoring a product during maintenance? To use different monitoring tools. On the, let's say, server side, you can use things like Zabbix. There's you know, a lot of you can use code. There are code level, there are let's say operational system level, machine level, and there's definitely like infrastructure level or different monitoring products. So different layers of abstraction, different things. You can have something something breaks in your code and it gets logged, let's say, right? And you can have where you see how services of your machine are running. What is important when updating a product that is in production being used? Well, it is really important to allow people to still be, you know, so they can use it, so have less downtime as possible, I would say. Never update production, you know, we shouldn't even have one production. This, again, another different topic. We should talk about what is continuous integration and how to do it correctly. How do you find an error in a large file with code that you cannot step through? Debugging is, there's many ways to do it. There's things where you have, let's say, different monitor tools, and you can monitor using monitor tool logs. You can find out what specific error was instead of having this huge stack trace, right? How can you make sure that changes in code do not affect any other parts of the product? You can't really. You can see where your code has been used. Let's say if you have a specific function and you say in the code it can be used 1,000 times. So yeah, you have to go through that and make sure that works the way it was supposed to. But if you, for example, have a procedure which does with, let's say, a very specific table and someone else uses that specific table, bro, you have a problem, because there's no way to ensure that. How do you create technical documentation for your products? Open Word document and write that. What measures have you taken to make your software products more easily maintainable? Wow. So probably start by having a pattern. If you have a pattern, you can recognize where things lie. Try to use all of the good practices like Kiss Dryer and all the others, so this way, you know, at least it looks readable. Never use frameworks which hasn't been tested or they are not, you know, well known, because no one will know how to maintain them. Try to write less of your things, you know. Again, there are many things you can do. How can you debug a system production environment while it's being used? You shouldn't debug system in a production environment because, well, you know, the consensus is you shouldn't touch it, even if it's, for example, working with the real traffic. It's controlling traffic of trains, so why would you even touch that? That's why there's things like monitoring logs and, you know, different tools where you can see something is happening. You can see that, let's say, one service is choking, and you can, you know, try to reroute traffic from that service to different service. So it's called load balancing. There are many ways to do it, but essentially you shouldn't go and try to debug by inputting some kind of, let's say, incorrect or not real data for testing. Yes, what is left? Do you know what load balancing is? I kinda just said that load balancing is if you have, let's say, one database quite full, or if you have two servers, you try to use them on very specific things. You know, for example, you can use like 50-50. If one reaches 50, you try to divert people to the other, and now you have 50-50 load. Can you name different levels of balancing? It really depends on what you want to do. So, for example, round robin, you just use just one by one, and that's how it works. You can have load-based, where you have specific thresholds. You can have crash-based, if you, let's say it's something like, for example, container environment. So you can have specific rules where one dies and, you know, 5 more spawns, and it uses them in parallel. So there's many ways to do it. Can you name reason why maintenance of a software is the biggest, most expensive part? It not necessarily is the biggest, most expensive part. I mean, because if you've written your software, but it can be monitored and it is living in a cloud which is respectable and, you know, quite well written, I don't believe that is going to be that expensive. It can be definitely controlled. What is the difference between re-engineering and reverse engineering? So reverse engineering essentially is you don't have a source code, and you have, let's say, functions which, you know, you see only on the higher level, and you presume what they do. That's called reverse engineering. You're trying from the result to make and, you know, how to make that result. Re-engineering usually means that you're recreating something. So you saw something which was done, and you say, yeah, okay, let's, you know, make it better. So we're engineering. Configuration management. Do you know what a baseline is in configuration management? How do you freeze an important moment in the project? Yeah, so how do you freeze an important moment? It really comes down to all very specific project rules you are using, or again, your company environment and your specific how you do it. So, for example, you can use things like PMBOK. It's a you know, boilerplate for product managers to use. There are others. So it really depends, and first of all, you should ask maybe what they are, what kind can be used. So in this way you can choose and talk about that. Without context is how do you freeze an important moment. You just come in and freeze. Which items do you normally place on the version control? All of them. I mean, if you can, try to version everything everywhere all the time, no exceptions. How do you make sure that team members know who changed what in a software project? So you kind of answered this by using your last question. If there's such a thing as version control, you will know who changed what. So if you're using Git and you're pushing to the server and people are using their real names and your work emails, you'll have that. Do you know the difference between tags and branches? When do you use which? So branches are usually it's quite simple to explain. So imagine you have let's say if you're placing your code, for example, over the internet on your local server, you're placing in one folder and you're always overwriting, right? So there's like only one line and it's hard to see what is happening with that code. So how a versioning system helps here, you can have let's say your main master branch, your main master branch where you're putting the things which should only exist in production, and you can have different work branches. So in a sense, what you're doing here with those branches, you have your isolated features you want to do, but you're not touching someone else's. So if, for example, everyone are working only with development branch, and you change something, you can break things for your like fellow developer who's working on similar topic than you are. If you have a isolated branch, then you're putting everything together. You want to have complex, and by solving them, you'll see that there are things which kind of overlap. So yeah, how would you manage changes to technical documentation like the architecture of the product? So again, really dependent on the company culture and processes you're working on. If, for example, most companies which use TOGAF, if you want to change architecture, you must go for architecture board, meaning that you must present it to different people. We must see different architects, how it affects their system and how it affects the vision. And if they all agree, you'll have, let's say, you'll have the older version which was already approved, and you'll have newer version which supersedes that, but you have both versions in the system, and this way it's controlled, So again, but it depends on the company. Which tools do you need to manage the state of all digital information in the project? Which tools do you like the best? Question about nothing. It comes down, whichever tools work for you best, just use those, work with that, and you're golden. How to deal with changes that a customer wants to release product? Super philosophical question. Really depends on the user, really depends on the customer. If the customer is someone from the inside, you can probably have department meeting and deal with that. If it's someone you paid money, it's more about the relationship and communication. You don't want to make your customer unhappy, so to speak, but if he wants to make a big change and that change costs, let's say 400 developer hours, that's going to be expensive. If, let's say, at least there's let's say 100 euros per one developer hour, right? So 400, 4,000, 40,000, right? So this is like that small change which customer is asking is going to cost you, let's say, 40,000 euros. So you try to make your customer happy where you can, but it's a business, so you always must look to the side of the business how we can not go under. Are there differences in managing version releases? Yes, obviously. There are some specific things in practice where you're doing about let's say versioning system. Can be major, it can be minor, and what you're calling release, it really comes down to your specific culture. So what you're calling, you can say that our main release is this, or our main release is that, or we are doing only like micro releases. There are many ways, but usually for versions it's major, minor. What is the difference between managing changes in text files versus managing changes in binary files? You shouldn't have files as such. You should work with databases and use abstractions where it's safe and secure. But you know, what is a text? So it's you know, characters. It can be pushed. It can be, and then you see something in binary. It's not exactly like that. So you know, I would say the biggest difference in managing those would be that you can have small and visible mistakes, so to speak, and then he can be probably improved quite more easily than, you know, try to open binary file in a text editor. And here is your answer. How would you treat simultaneous development of multiple RTCS or increments in maintenance issues? It really depends on, again, your company culture and underlying processes. How I would personally deal with, I don't know, calm and, you know, mind. I would talk with my team. Is it like breaking changes? Is it something which we can do? Is it small? Is it big? They're really dependent on many things. If they're what we're calling the projects which are on fire, we're probably, you know, going to be focused on that, and we will probably not even discuss other things. So again, culture, process, very specific. Right. I thought that this video is going to be very fast and very speedy and very easy, but I'm feeling really soaked from all of the heat and all of the stress I had to go through. So yeah, to answer 100 questions is definitely a challenge, and it's definitely a way longer video than I intended. I don't know why in my mind I thought that it's going to be like 10-minute thing, and you know, lol. So, but here is absolutely amazing boilerplate for me and for you guys who's out there, who wants to be a developer or who's just searching for new things. You'll see and you'll understand that in reality, like real things, they are like troublesome. And if you want to go through this and you want to answer, and by the way, as I said, some answers are like very philosophical and they're wrong and they're bad and they're badly formatted. But if you want to do and like take any of those answers and talk into more detail, it's going to take and eat up a lot of time. So case in point, static versus you know, like what was that? Static versus singleton, right? Yeah, static versus singleton. So if you're just saying what, oh, like one's a pattern, the other is built-in thing, and that's enough, and you can move in and you get plus, probably yeah, but you know, you still have to go through some things. If you want to talk in depth and explain how it really should be and what it's all about, so it definitely takes time, because you want to speak about that, you know, singletons are used on very specific cases for very specific reasons. For example, why the printer would be a singleton rather than it, you know, you can make 10,000 printers and use those, right? There's a very specific case and it makes very specific sense for that. You should also speak about lifetime, because static class doesn't have a lifetime for you know, if you're defendants injecting something, it really is important. Is it singleton? Is it transient? Is it scope? So that is important. So you need to speak about those things and you need to do that. So to do it correctly, it takes time. So if I would be totally honest and like doing a small retro right now and looking at these questions, I don't know, hour is not enough. It's you can take 10 questions and you can, you know, speak about a lot of things, especially if they're like badly defined. Like for example, can you name some functional requirement? You can say one, that's a number, right? Or you can try to think and figure out and make 10 of those, right? If the question is, do you know some techniques? There are a lot of techniques, there are a lot of patterns, right? So which one do you want to talk about it? What kind of specific things you want to hear about that pattern? How it's being written? Why is it done? Do you want to hear history? There are specific histories. For example, Now it's called service locator anti-pattern, right? Because we have simple dependency injection. But let me assure you, 15 years ago, service locator anti-pattern was the pattern, because we didn't have that sexy dependency injection then, and it was definitely used, right? So it's easy to say that something apologies is anti-pattern now, but if you want to talk about this topic in detail and if you really want to understand how it goes, there's definitely some history, what it is now, and what to do with that, because there can be very good monolithic systems which work as monolithic systems, and there can be a lot of monolithic systems which do not work correctly if you put them into, let's say, virtualized environment. But if you, for example, cut them into specific modules and you use those in the containers, that can make a lot of sense. So I would say for each and every question, context is the key. What do you mean by this? In what context? In what parameters? And that's the way to talk. When you say language, English is a language, right? So probably programming language, I assume, but why should I assume? So yeah, guys, it was very long video, and I think I'll never do such videos again, because F this, but I kinda showed that we can answer many different things, some a bit humor, a bit truth. But thanks for watching. I do hope you subscribe and like, and I promise you this: if you do subscribe, like, and you give this video for friends so you can subscribe and like, I'll never do such long videos again. Thanks for watching. Cheers.